Hey everyone, it's Strange Michael. I hope you're doing well today. I have a review for The Houses October Built 2, which came out 3 years after the previous movie. It is a found footage movie. This one came out in 2017. It's about an hour and 40 minutes long. And I hated this the first time I saw it. It has some issues with pacing, mainly with meandering around too much. The way that the first film ended, without telling you too much, our cast were kind of in a really bad place, and I kind of hoped that that the sequel that I had heard a lot of interesting things about before I saw this a couple of years back for the first time ever, alongside the first one for the first time ever, I had hoped that we were going a very cool direction with this movie. And for me, it's a very disappointing film. It has its moments that are really fun. There are moments that I laughed through. There are interesting parts throughout this movie. But it kind of betrays a lot of the people who are fans, like myself, of the first movie. The first film being a found footage movie is really cool. It's really fun. If you love Halloween-themed movies, that's totally up your alley. This one's kind of the same type of thing. For the most part, it's basically a retread of that original movie in a different way. There's some different outcomes, some different issues. I'm not going to tell you too much, but the way the first film ended, that's where this film picks up. It's kind of a very short recap of what happened at the end of the first movie, maybe like a minute long. And then we jump right into one of the characters, and pretty much all of the characters from that first movie, escaping, getting away, and they go on to live their lives. I'm assuming this takes place about a year later. I could be wrong, but it should be about a year later. And it goes more of a mockumentary style than a straight-up found footage movie like the first one does, which is kind of a shame. You get a lot of weirdo camera angles and stuff that should not whatsoever be part of this movie, that shouldn't even be able to be in the film, you know. Paranormal Activity Next of Kin also had the same issue when I saw that for the first time the other day. For me, I really like the cast of people, the actors, the characters themselves, and the writing of those characters, and the events they're doing, the interviews, all that stuff for that first movie. Some of that stuff's real, like real interviews with cast members of the different haunts they visit. For this one, everything felt off. Everything felt very off, and I understand people were able to recognize these guys as a cast and crew. I understand Bobby Rowe, who directed this and wrote it, and I assume kind of co-wrote it and co-worked on it with his brother Mikey, who also stars in this. Of course, everybody pretty much came back. The exact same 3 or 4 male actors, and the one particular girl in this from the first film named Brandy. And I think, once again, they put a good performance forward. It's the betrayal of those characters that really gets me. It's interesting how Brandy, for example, the female character, is very, very traumatized by what happened to her in the first movie, and it was horrifying in that film. I can't even imagine what it would have been like to have gone through the extreme stuff she went through at the extreme haunts, and again, that's pretty much what this franchise is about. This movie kind of veers into that a little bit less than the first film did, even though it still does it at certain points. A lot of this movie is just outdoors types of haunts. For example, haunted hayrides. I've never been on one, never been in like a corn maze or anything, and it tries to do that, and it was kind of cool. I kind of enjoyed this little bit of a different outside haunted attraction type of thing. That was kind of cool with the Halloween decorations, the costumes, the people, all of that. It's really nice. You still have some interviews and that kind of thing in here. You have some new kind of outdoor types of things, like the zombie run or zombie crawl or whatever. That was pretty cool. I really enjoyed watching this movie. Now let me tell you that I enjoyed watching it maybe for the first hour. Even though not really much of anything happens, it meanders along very much like this review, and it just kind of takes its time, lets its characters live and thrive, and they're trying to convince Brandy to come back on for the new movie, documentary, whatever they're trying to do, that all the guys want to do because they are not traumatized by the horrifying things they went through due to the blue skeleton or whatever it was called at the end of the first movie. They're all kind of selfish, in my opinion. And the thing is, again, this film, I really want to hit on this again. As good as the performances are, as good as the acting is, most of the movie for these characters with the improv humor and everything, by the end of the movie, they totally betray our characters. Now mind you, there's supposed to be a 3rd and 4th movie at some point for this franchise. It's been like 5 years since this movie came out. I don't know if we're getting another one. It kind of seems like the negative reception on this movie, that to me it seems like the majority of people that were fans of the first one seem to hate this one. In my opinion, from what I've seen online, from the people I've talked to in person, a lot of people seem to be more on my side of thinking this is a very, very rough movie. Even the look of it feels cheaper than in the first film. The beginning of this movie, when you actually have the title show up on the screen, looks like a low budget, more low budget, even though this probably had a higher budget with the drone shots and the drone involved in the storyline than the first film. It feels cheap, it feels lackluster. The whole eating brains contest thing is kind of cute, but it takes a while to get there. Again, that first hour of this hour and 40-minute movie just kind of dragged for me. It really didn't have anything to do, and I was kind of let down with it, frankly. The movie overall, I think, is a disappointment. Even in that first hour that I enjoyed. Again, there's moments I laughed about tremendously out loud. My wife was looking at me like I was nuts. And I had a good time with those moments, mainly because of our cast of characters here, who I like seeing work together. They're fun people. They're fun to see banter and bicker and whatever they're doing in their RV as they travel around the US. I liked all that. And then we get to the actual directing style. Again, I talked about some of the camera angles and stuff that should not be in this movie because they physically can't exist. One of those is absolutely awful. They may or may not have stalkers coming after them that are tied to some of the people involved in that first movie, particularly Porcelain, or whatever her name is, the doll-looking girl. She's showing up in shots every once in a while at each of the haunts that they go to. It's kind of interesting how that happens. Some of the directing around that's kind of cool. However, we have certain shots of other stalkers involved that they could be filming the RV driving down the street, and then it just turns blue, like the tint on the screen just goes from color to like a blue, and it's just, it adds to that cheapo garbage, why in the middle of this footage would this turn blue type of nonsense that this movie is filled with. It's just bad idea after bad idea. I do not like this movie anywhere as much as I like the first one, and I gave the first one a very fairly large rating. You know, is a very positive rating for a really solid flick that I really admire in the found footage genre. And I think most people who are fans like myself really like and admire that movie for what it did for haunts and Halloween and all these cool things. There's no like CGI or anything like that in this movie, but there is practical effects that really, some of it is fine. Some of it's supposed to be just decorations for Halloween and the haunts that they're going to as attractions and whatever. And then some of it is just goofy and really, again, in that ending, make no sense whatsoever. It's just too much. The movie is too much. There's too much crammed into this thing in a really bad way to be able to meander so much and then have too much happen in the finale that really is not built to, and to have it betray the characters so much, all of them, it's depressing to me how much of a horrible turn this movie took. Anyway, The House is October Built 2. I think it's also called Hellbent for a subtitle on that. This is a really disappointing movie. Even the music is kind of generic and disappointing. Some people seem to really like it, like Good Bad Flicks. I went and watched his video about this movie, both of his videos about this movie. And I saw some other reviews. I think Sinister Cinema Reviews review as well about this. And a lot of people seem to like the music. I was like the only person who feels like he doesn't like the music that much in this movie. And as they go through the haunted houses that they visit, they play a bunch of like really bassy types of music. I know they did that in the first film when I watched it the other day, but it's like, it doesn't fit. Everything about this movie just feels cheap. I said that over and over again, and I mean it deeply. If I had to rate The Houses October Built 2, Hellbent, or whatever it's called, on a 5-star basis, I enjoyed a little bit of it. I enjoyed it enough that I think it deserves a meandering review for a very meandering movie, but I hate the ending of it. I think the twists at the end of this film, both of the really big twists at the end of this movie, are bad. Really bad. And I think they're nonsense. I think they're stupid. It's convoluted. This whole movie, towards its finale, makes no sense, and it betrays the first movie's fans so much that I think it's kind of a slap in the face. Imagine if a franchise you loved really did more of like a Friday the 13th Part 5, which I love that film, but most people seem to hate it. People who saw it back in the day in theaters hate it. It's fascinating the way that happened, but this is that situation in a lot of ways. It's really kind of a bummer, in my opinion, after watching the first one. I kind of didn't want to do this review. I kind of didn't want to sit down and watch this night on a Sunday night. I decided to, I bit my tongue, sorry. I decided to go ahead and do it and just get it out of the way. It's that time of the year, fall, September, whatever. I'm glad it's over. But if I had to rate this movie on a 5-star basis, I can't give it more than like a 3 out of 5 stars, and usually that's considered a positive review for a movie. For me, that just means, even though this is low budget, it's fairly watchable most of the time. With the drone shots and everything, and the kind of humor that's in here, it's fairly enjoyable to an extent. It's fairly watchable. Watchable is really the word I have for this movie. I'm not sure how much I would say it's entertaining. It's fun sometimes, enough to be considerable when you talk about this thing in a review like I'm doing right now. But is it good? No. Is it really well done? Sometimes, maybe 25% of the time, it's actually a smart decision or a smart filmmaking technique or something very well executed. Most of the time, this is a massive disappointment, and I hate to be the guy to say that. Anyway, what are your thoughts on this sequel? What do you think about it? Do you hate it? Do you love it? Do you love it more than the first film? I would love to hear from people who seem to feel that way about this. For me, it extremely lets me down. This time, the second time I've ever seen this movie, and I feel just as irritated and angry as I did the first time I saw the first one, or the second one. Anyway, what are your thoughts on it? Put it down in the comment section down below. Are you still stoked for a possible 3 and 4? If we get those, even though they're outlined, they could be out there at some point in the future, and I kind of hope they would be. I hope they do to this movie what part 1, well, I kind of like the opening of this film, what it does with part 1's ending, how it ties directly to that. I'm hoping 3 and 4 can do the same thing for this movie, and maybe really kind of put your mind at peace, maybe make you hate it less, because this film, it's stupid. It's really stupid. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. God bless you all, and goodbye.